of the Midcoast Community Council for July 24th, 2019.
Claire, I think you need to start over. You
Okay.
didn't know you were starting.
We're ready? Okay. Welcome to the regular meeting of the Midcoast Community Council for July 24th, 2019. Would the council members introduce themselves from my left?
Dan Haggerty.
Dave Olson.
Claire Toutant.
Michelle Weil.
Len Erickson.
Barbara Mathewson.
Thank you. There is no Board of Supervisors report tonight, is that correct? Yes. Carrie Delman is here representing Supervisor Horsley's office. There is no report from the City of Half Moon Bay tonight. Are there any other government representatives here that have a report? Okay. Then we're open for public comment. If you have a comment, either on this part of the meeting or on the agendized part, please fill out a speaker slip in the outside lobby there. Are there any public comments at this point on anything not on the agenda? Okay. We'll move on to the consent agenda. There's one item on the consent agenda, and that's the approval of the minutes for July 11th. Do I have a motion to approve that?
Well, the meeting was on the 10th.
Okay, so we need to correct that.
It says July 10th in the actual document.
Right.
Second.
Do we need to clarify that it should be the 10th?
Sounds like the document is right.
Yeah.
I'll just correct it on the agenda.
Okay. So all in favor of approving the minutes for July 10th? All opposed? Passes 6-0. So we'll move on to the regular agenda, and there are two items on the agenda. The first one is a presentation by the Executive Director of the San Mateo Parks Foundation, Michelle Beasley. And I think there's a visual part to that as well. So we'll get that up here in a minute. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me speak to you tonight. My name is Michelle Beasley, and I've been the Executive Director of the San Mateo County Parks Foundation. Oh, let's move this here. Thank you. Yep. I just want to thank you for letting me come speak to you tonight. I've been the Executive Director for the San Mateo County Parks Foundation since November 2015, following in the footsteps of Julia Bott, who was the longtime founding Executive Director. As my PowerPoint comes up, I just wanted to take this opportunity to reintroduce the Parks Foundation to folks, introduce myself, and just let you know a little bit about what the San Mateo County Parks Foundation is up to. Our mission is to inspire people to care for, learn about, and enjoy San Mateo County parks, and we are the nonprofit partner to the San Mateo County Parks Department. And last year we just celebrated our 20th year. So we've been around for 20 years, and we've raised over $12 million for a variety of programs and projects that would not otherwise be funded. And part of that reason is, unlike most of the counties in the Bay Area, San Mateo County doesn't actually have a dedicated source of revenue for parks. Other counties do. In Santa Clara County, they have a park charter fund, so there's a property tax set aside. But San Mateo County doesn't have any such dedicated source of revenue for San Mateo County parks. So hence the Parks Foundation was created, and so all the money we raise goes back into the county parks. This is a slightly condensed version of the presentation I give to other groups because I wanted to focus on the coast a little bit more. But what I always like to do is start off by talking about the benefits of parks and open space. And the first benefit is very specific to our redwood parks here in San Mateo County. Not only are redwoods among the oldest living things on the planet, they are very majestic, but it turns out that redwood trees are a particularly potent weapon when it comes to climate change. They absorb and store more carbon from the atmosphere per acre than any other forest on the planet, including rainforests. Next slide. Another very obvious benefit of parks and open space is they really are good for our mental and physical health. You're starting to hear more and more about doctors actually prescribing 30 minutes of nature a week to their patients because there have been a lot of studies that show that just half an hour in a park has significant benefits. It addresses all kinds of mental and physical health issues, from depression and heart disease, ADHD symptoms, eyesight problems, and so forth. Next slide. Another benefit of parks and open space is this is our green infrastructure. That means that Mother Nature can do some things a lot better than, say, man. If we channelize a creek, make it concrete, you're moving water away from the source a lot quicker, which can lead to downstream flooding. When you let Mother Nature take care of things, take care of wet weather impacts, not only are there cost savings associated with that, but I mean, you have this beautiful environment that has multiple benefits. So when you think about it, our hillsides filter our drinking water. Again, our redwood trees are absorbing carbon and cleaning the air we breathe. Creeks help to address stormwater runoff, and so that's what we call our green infrastructure. Next slide. And then we live in one of these biodiversity hotspots. There are several of them all around the world, and the California coast is definitely one of them. And what that means is that we have a lot of different bugs and animals and birds that live together. And the more diversity you have, the healthier the ecosystem. Again, that goes back to clean air, clean water, healthy soils, regulating our climate. Next slide. Perhaps one of the most obvious benefits of nearby parks and open space is that people like to go and hang out in them. There's a lot of different amenities. We have world-class windsurfing and kiteboarding at Coyote Point. There's a lot of horseback trails, there's hiking, there's playgrounds and so forth, and this is probably what most people think about when they think about parks and open space. And next slide. And then the sixth benefit of having parks and open space is that they help your property tax revenues. You get a lot of tourism-based dollars coming into San Mateo County because of our parks. And then when you think about leading a more healthy lifestyle and taking advantage of our parks and open space, you save money on health-related costs down the road. So I like to start off and talk about all the benefits of parks and open space, because it's a lot more than just the pretty hills that maybe I will go on a hike next week. They really are fundamental to a thriving and healthy community. So there's 22 parks in the San Mateo County Park System, but I'm just going to quickly go through the ones on the coast, and I'm not even going to really talk about these very much because I think all of you are the experts on your parks. Devil's Slide, one of the newest additions to the park system. Fitzgerald Marine Reserve, which just celebrated its 50th anniversary this year. Next slide. Murata Surf, a wonderful addition to the California Coastal Trail. Next slide. Moss Beach Park, this is one of two pop-up or top park, like I guess you would call them pocket parks, and the other one is in North Fair Oaks in Redwood City. Next slide. Pillar Point Bluff, definitely a popular one for everyone on the coast. Next slide. Quarry Park, this is definitely a beloved park, especially for people who have dogs. We've given a little bit of money to the park rangers to help them start beefing up their community garden there. Next slide. San Pedro Valley, very popular. This is one of my favorite parks in the county park system. And then next slide. Sanchez Adobe. Sanchez Adobe is going to have a big year this year. The county has been making a lot of improvements. There's going to be a new visitor center, and hopefully this fall there'll be some ribbon cuttings. Very much ties into a lot of the work that the San Mateo County Historical Association is doing around the Ohlone Portola Heritage Trail. Next slide. And then Tanitas Creek Beach. This is not a park yet. It'll be a park in about 2 to 3 years, but it is the newest and youngest soon-to-be park in the San Mateo County Park System, and a real asset. I think we should all be very excited that this is being added to the park system. Next slide. So I wanted to start off by talking about two of the biggest projects that the foundation has worked on over our 20 years. The first one is the Bill and Jean Lane Education Center, which is at Edgewood Park and Natural Preserve in Redwood City. The foundation funded everything from the planning and the design and the permitting to the building of this much-loved home base for the Friends of Edgewood. Next slide. And then Murata Surf. The foundation wrote the grant that secured $1.6 million to permanently protect this land from eventual development. Next slide. So I wanted to talk briefly about the three legs, I guess I would say, of the stool that kind of describes our work. And the first one is around Parks for All. And this is really an important one because a lot of the people the people who are using San Mateo County parks don't necessarily reflect the demographics of San Mateo County. And if we want to make sure that the next generation is passionate about parks and open space, we need to be connecting kids to the parks today, ideally by the age of 10. So next slide. So one of the things we've been doing and has been growing in popularity is we will fund the bus transportation for schools that serve a significant percentage of students who are eligible for free or reduced cost lunch, as well as nonprofits that serve low-income youth. It can sometimes cost $1,000 just to take a half-day field trip from, say, San Mateo to Memorial Park. And that can be out of reach. So we will pay for them and we will hook them up with a docent. Next slide. And then we have a partnership with the San Mateo County Health System. So our pediatricians in the county are actually prescribing nature right now for kids who are either pre-diabetic or obese. And so this is a pad where you just rip it off and they say, go spend some time in a park. Well, if they go to Coyote Point or Flood Park, there is a $6 parking fee. If you're low income, that can feel like a barrier. So this pass is a free pass for the person who uses it, and it makes its way back to the Parks Foundation, and we reimburse the county for that cost. Next slide. Bicycle Sunday, I like to plug this. We have been funding Bicycle Sunday for many years now. It's a year-round event that takes place along Kenyatta Road, and it's a really fun way for young families or someone who wants to learn how to ride their bike to do so in a very safe environment, because Kenyatta Road is completely shut down to cars every Sunday between 9 a.m. and 3 p.m. Next slide. I have a slide of the Rancho de Fiesta, which is a historical association event, but I put this in here because we are funding two of the smaller elements, but still pretty important. So there's going to be a visitor center is being installed now at Sanchez Adobe, and then there's going to be ADA pathways, and so we're funding ADA pathways around Sanchez Adobe so people of all abilities can really get the full feel of the three major periods of California history. And then we're also funding the landscaping. So once all of the construction is done, new landscaping will go in. So these are small elements, but we're very excited to be able to close this project. So that will be coming online by fall. Next slide. And then we're always looking to do new events. This is the Coyote Point Kite Festival. It was our 3rd annual. This was an idea of Ranger Catherine Wright, and we love this idea. And so the Parks Foundation is really proud to be a sponsor of this event. We had about 1,000 people come out to Coyote Point on June 29th. It's always the last Saturday in June, so we hope all of you can make it next year. Next slide. So the second leg in our stool, and something that I would like to see us do more of, is really stewarding the natural environment. Next slide. The work we have done here has really focused at Edgewood Park and Natural Preserve. We've been funding the reintroduction of the bay checker spot butterfly. Edgewood was its home. It was pushed out because of all the traffic on 280, and so they've been bringing the bay checker spots from Coyote Ridge and San Jose back to Edgewood. So we've been funding that reintroduction for a couple of years now. Next slide. And we've also been funding the reintroduction of the San Mateo thorn mint and the white ray pentacata, which are rare and endangered plants that are pretty much only found in San Mateo County and pretty much only found around Edgewood Park. And this is really important because when it comes to native species and that biodiversity, Edgewood is phenomenal. There's over 350 rare special plants there. And every spring, if you haven't been to Edgewood in the springtime, I highly recommend it because the colors of all the wildflowers are just absolutely spectacular. And so we've been funding, next slide, we've also been funding the volunteer program for county parks for pretty much the last 20 years, which means we've been supplying the tools and the resources and the materials and the food for the volunteers to go out and steward our parks, including funding 2 tool trailers. And then the third leg on our stool, next slide, is really about interpreting and making people feel safe and feeling safe in the parks, but also like interpreting what they're seeing in the park. So we've been funding new trail signs throughout all the parks. Next slide. We funded an interpretive display. This is in Memorial Park over Pescadero Creek. This was a creek crossing that allowed the steelhead to go back and forth easily without any barriers. And so we were able to fund the interpretation so people can understand why that's so important. Next slide. We funded the logo for the Ohlone Portola Heritage Trail. Next slide. And we also fund the reopening of trails that have closed either because of big storm events or in this case erosion. This trail has been closed for 2 years, but it's slated to open this month. Next slide. We have been an underwriter for Open Road with Doug McConnell for the past couple of years, which has featured episodes on Double Slide, San Bruno Mountain, and the Ohlone Portola Heritage Trail. Next slide. And then we were one of the closers on a interpretive video about the marine protected areas here on the coast. So this is an example of some of the things that we have recently been funding. Next slide. The thing I wanted to end on, I know this isn't on the coast, but I think it's significant. So this is Memorial Park. And Memorial Park is going to be turning 100 in 2024, which is basically the birth of the San Mateo County Parks Department. And Memorial Park hasn't really undergone any significant renovations until now. And so the Parks Department is putting significant investment into Memorial Park in the water treatment plant and the wastewater treatment plant. And there's going to be new bathrooms and showers. And we're complementing that investment by focusing on the nature center and the ranger station and a couple of other things, so that by the time 2024 rolls around, Memorial Park has been gussied up for its next 100 years. So it was a really quick introduction to me and to what we have been working on recently. And I also would love to just end with a question, because this isn't just an opportunity for me to share what we're up to, but I really want to hear from you at some point what you see as the biggest needs in the park system right now, and how the Parks Foundation could possibly support coastal parks more in the future. So I just want to thank you again for letting me speak to you tonight, and that's my presentation.
Thank you, Michelle. I know I have some questions and comments, but does anybody in the public want to say anything about this or ask any questions? Go ahead. Come up to the podium, please.
I'll get you a slip.
Okay.
I'm Nancy Marsh from El Granada, and I chair the Granada Community Services District Parks Advisory Committee. And there are some things in the community. One we're thinking of in Quarry Park, where the district has offered up funding, at least some funding, to support a pump track in Quarry Park.
Oh, yeah.
And we've been waiting and waiting and waiting on the master plan. But we haven't set, the board hasn't set a particular amount. But if we needed partnership on something like that, because it really is aimed at, when you said 10-year-olds, at kind of the 10 to 15-year-olds, is that something that we could connect with you on?
Absolutely. Yeah, no,
Okay,
that's the kind
that's
of
what I
thing,
wanted to-
those are the kind of things that I definitely want to hear about.
Okay, great, thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. What about people on the council? You have questions or comments? Len?
So you said some counties have a tax fund for it, but we're not one? Could you give a sense of comparison, like in Santa Clara, how big is their tax fund?
I can't. I can get you the research. I think the only two counties are Napa and San Mateo County that do not have a dedicated
not.
source. The rest have some kind of either a property tax set aside, or the voters pass like a parks and open space bond. So it's a slightly different mechanism in each county. So what I can do is I think there's a couple organizations that have like kind of mapped all the different policies or funding mechanisms, and I can get that information. I can share with you.
Do tax funds do some of the same things you do, and they're given directly to the counties? Or how does, I mean, are we losing out by not having?
You know, this is something, I mean, before my time, they've tried a couple of times to bring this to San Mateo County voters, and it's just never passed the threshold. And it's possible that a vote could come before San Mateo County voters again in the next 5 years. It's hard to say, but for some reason it just hasn't passed in San Mateo County, and so that's what.
Is having that type of a tax fund a goal of your group as well, or are you really a separate?
Say that, what was the question?
Would your organization be supportive or a driving force even to have such an
Yeah.
assessment?
I think it's absolutely critical that there be a dedicated source of revenue for parks. When there's a downturn in the economy, there's a focus on the safety net, which is your sheriff's department, your health system, homelessness, and parks get seen as a luxury and they tend to get cut. But I would argue they're not a luxury. They're absolutely vital parts of a thriving community. And what we're dealing with is, or what the county parks department is dealing with, is like a backlog of maintenance projects, but not enough money. So we would be supportive of seeing dedicated, yeah.
So my recollection is that Julia Bott was an active person supporting those measures in the past, so that's why I was asking whether your organization would begin to consider that.
I don't know if we're in the position to lead it, but we would be definitely supportive, 100%, yeah. And that would be a discussion we would have with our board, and yeah, I think it makes sense to have more money coming in for San Mateo County Parks. And, if it goes to the voters and the voters say yes, then that's a big resounding yes from the whole community.
Dan? I'm sorry. I saw Dan's hand up.
Yeah, thanks for your presentation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really didn't know you guys existed, so I'm very interested. I really like the presentation. You're really caring for wildlife, really.
Yeah.
Of course, I did not know that, so that's good news. So let's protect the redwoods. I was wondering, will your foundation be involved at all with the? I understand there's a beta shore trail up and through. I think it's where's my? Can't remember the creek it's going to follow. I think it's going to it's south of Half Moon Bay somewhere. Actually, are you aware of that?
I'm a little bit aware of it, and I don't think I'm qualified to speak on it today. I wouldn't say we're involved now, but that doesn't mean we couldn't become involved in the future.
I would imagine that you would be really fully supportive of safe passages for people that use parks and need to get to parks.
Yes.
And so I don't know if up at the Great Wall Cove, there's been some talk about underpasses under the road to keep us safe. If that's something that's ever come up.
It hasn't come up, but I definitely think safe access is going to be critical. Just in all of our parks. I think about Edgewood Park, actually, right off the top of my head. It's parking problems. There's a lot of challenges around access to the parks. And I think with a growing population, that's something that we're going to have to look at a lot more closely. And I think, how do we get people to the parks? But I don't know a lot of details on the things that you're specifically bringing up. But you're not alone in not knowing about the San Mateo County Parks Foundation, which is part of the reason why I'm trying to get the word out, because we've been tabling, say, at like Sawyer Camp Trail, and we've been around for 20 years, and so a lot of people are saying, I have no idea. And so I really appreciate this opportunity to just share our message a little bit more.
Dave, you had something?
Look forward to making that
I'm
in
sorry.
the future.
Yeah, I will say, so I'm well aware of your work. I was on the Native Creek System Advisory Committee with some of the Parks Conservancy folks. But one of the things that I have a concern about in our parks, not just the county parks, but all of our parks, is some of them are actually being loved to death. And so while I want to promote access to the parks and get people in the parks, I do want to make sure that they're not hurting the parks. And that was certainly a big focus for Community Creek Beach in all of the meetings. One of the things that I have personally offered, and as a member of the MCC to the Parks Department, is if they want to lobby for a larger budget, particularly for rangers and interpretive people, we'll be happy to support them, and so far they haven't been willing to take that up. On the coast here, we have a lot of problems at Fitzgerald, formerly at Tuditas Creek, Colorado West, where people are doing things that are not good for the marine life, they're not good for the environment. So I would certainly like to see some form of after-hours patrol in a lot of the parks. And I'm happy to work with anybody that can help make that happen.
Okay, thank you for sharing that.
Michelle?
Hi, thanks for coming today. I didn't realize the wealth of parks that we have in the county. I mean, I visited some of them, but when you put them all in one presentation together, it's really astounding how many we have. And I've personally been able to take advantage of a lot of the resources, and so it's awesome. And I have a 3-year-old daughter who uses Moss Beach Park, and we live next to Fitzgerald. So I was just wondering if community members or members of the council want to get more involved. What's your recommendation on how to do that?
I mean, I think one of the best ways to get involved in the parks is to volunteer, and there are so many incredible volunteer groups. We plug a lot of the Friends of Edgewood, the Friends of Fitzgerald Marine Reserve is a wonderful resource, the Friends of Hutteritt and Wunderlich, Pacific Beach Coalition is a fantastic organization taking care of our beaches, San Bruno Mountain Watch, you can volunteer in their nursery. And then we have also funded a position at the county, it's the volunteer coordinator, Stuart Smith. And he leads the stewardship corps, which should kick off, I think, in December and runs through May. And those are every Saturday, and they rotate around the county. And it's just a really wonderful way for all ages to get their hands in the dirt and really connect with the parks. And so I find that our biggest supporters started out as volunteers. And I think there's a lot of mental and physical benefits of just like getting your hands dirty and digging in the dirt. So I would always advocate, and I'm more than happy to direct people to volunteer groups close to their particular park. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Barbara? Orlando? I also was vaguely aware that you existed, but had no idea how much you did. What are your major funding sources?
We are really powered by individuals. Actually, I have to give Julia a lot of credit because she built a lot of deep relationships with people in this county over 20 years. And a lot of our supporters have been supporting us since 1999, which I think is very impressive. So individuals giving anywhere from $25 to $500. We do get support from a variety of foundations, whether they're focusing on habitat restoration or better access to the parks. And then we do get some corporate sponsorships. So that's generally our breakdown. And we'll be putting out an annual report probably this fall, so that will give a lot more detail.
One of the members of the public asked me to bring up the fact that they had, this is both for you and Nancy, had recently gotten lost in Quarry Park, and were wondering if maybe more signage could be available.
Yeah, I think that's tied to the master plan. I think once the master plan has been completed, because there are some trails that I think are going to be sunset. Yeah, I can see why people do get lost there. So patience. They will be signed soon, but I think we have to make sure the master plan is done, and so that might take a little bit more time.
Can you do anything to lobby to get it done? We haven't seen anything new in years.
I think once we have a permanent parks director, we'll start to see some movement on a lot of these things. Yeah. So.
And we did get a timeline on that when Peggy was here 2 meetings ago. So, yeah, it will be finalized sometime early in 2020 at the Board of Supervisors.
Any other comments, questions? Thank you very much. It was interesting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, we'll move on to our other regular agenda item, which is regarding the proposed expansion of the Harbor View Motel in El Granada. We can get the aerial views, I think, first.
Want the images then?
Yeah, the images, not the plans, the images.
Sorry,
That's good.
thought it was prepared.
Pretty good. So we'll look at a couple of things here. First is these images that you can actually see pictures of what we're talking about, and then we'll look very briefly at the plans, the blueprint type things, to show a couple of features, and then we'll go through the letter that we're proposing and the attachment to the letter that we're proposing, and then we'll talk about it. So everybody is familiar with the Harbor View Inn in El Granada on Avenue Alhambra, just down the road here. It has currently, I believe, 18 rooms, is that right? Something like that. And they're proposing to put another 15 rooms in on the vacant property between the existing, I'm supposed to look at the microphone, the existing motel and the restaurant La Presse there. So as you notice, there is some landscaping in front of the existing motel, and then obviously some space in between the next building. So if we could look at the next slide. This is the rendition of the completed project as proposed. One of the things you'll notice in this, which will be brought up in further comments, is that the point of view that you're looking at this from is slightly above the actual angle of the project. You're not looking at it as you would from the street if you were standing there looking at it. So you're looking at it from above, which makes it look a little bit smaller than it is. Okay, next one?
So just a question, so
Yeah.
am I right in assuming there's 12 ocean-facing rooms, and then it looks like there must be therefore 3 that are facing to the back?
I believe that's the case.
And is there considered, do they have to provide extra parking?
Yes,
Do we have a plan that shows?
it'll be on the blueprints.
Thanks.
Yeah. This is just another view of how this relates to the other buildings in the area. You're probably all pretty much familiar with this area with, the next adjoining building being the restaurant. Next one, please. And more views of pretty much the same thing. There we see the restaurant. The building, as it's proposed, will go immediately adjacent to this restaurant building. And the outdoor dining section there, as we understand it, will be immediately adjacent to the wall of the motel. Next.
So it will take away the view on that side from the...
Correct.
Okay.
This is the last image.
Oh, that's the last one, okay. So if we could look at the plans. And some of you will probably be able to read more into these plans than I am, but I'll hit some highlights.
Gonna take a while. They're big.
That's okay. I think there's only one or two that I really want to point out.
Okay, if you let me know which
Well,
ones.
keep going. It does have this odd roof, which I guess there are various ways of calculating the height, and then that may be an issue, but that's, we'll get to that later. Keep going. Thank you.
Will there be story poles for this?
We're getting, that's one of our requests, is that they put up story poles. Apparently they're not obligated to do so, but we would like that to happen.
That's what you're looking for?
No, I'm looking for the one that has the writing on it. Not that. It's going so fast, I don't know. Back up again. I'm looking for the one where the entrance is marked, the Madrid entrance. That's the same view we saw before, where they're looking at it from a relatively above angle. That's a little bit more,
This is from the back.
That's a back view.
yeah. Okay, keep going. Okay, keep going. One more.
That shows the entrance to Madrid.
Okay. There is one where it's pointed out more clearly, but the point is two things here that we want to show. One is that there is now no entrance to this property from Madrid, which is the street around the corner there. And with the new proposal, there will be a driveway opening onto Madrid, as well as the one from Alhambra. The other thing which is really important to point out is, if you look at the existing building in the white outline, you see that there's a little bit of space in between the building and the street, sidewalk. If you look at the new section, that new section comes out all the way to the sidewalk. There's no opportunity for any landscaping, either in front of the motel or on the side that adjoins the restaurant. Those are the two major things I want to point out from these plans, although I'm sure there'll be other things that people want to point out. So the other thing that we wanted to mention fairly strongly on this is an explanation of why we're looking at this. Normally, when there's new development proposed in the Midcoast, the CVR Sea, Coastal Design Review Committee, takes a look at it and makes comments about its design and that kind of thing. The CVRC has no jurisdiction over this, because the CVRC at this point only reviews residential properties. There was a thought at first that this might include a manager's residence, and at this point it's decided that it does not include that, so it is outside of the purview of the CVRC. There is a proposal that they start reviewing buildings like this. At this point, they're not doing that, and so we're doing it.
So we're doing it.
We're doing it. Okay. So if you want to take a look at our letter, Let me just point out a few parts of the letter that I would like to emphasize. Basically, what we're saying is that we think, or our letter says, and we'd like to consider whether we'll adopt it, is that the building is very massive and very bulky, which is out of character with the rest of that area of El Granada. We're concerned about the setbacks, like they don't exist, like the proximity to the restaurant and how that may affect that. And also concerned about the windows. If you look at the design of the existing building, they are, I don't know what you call them, windows that jut out.
Bay windows.
Bay windows, thank you. It's unclear, and maybe you can tell, Dan, whether these bay windows in the new section are continuous, if there's a break in between the first and second floor or not. But we're thinking that there may be some ways of de-emphasizing the prominence of the windows, which would lower the effect of the vertical lines, make it look a little smaller. We can talk about that. We are calling for story poles to be put up so that people can see what this is actually going to look like. And then there are some concerns about the appearances of the building in terms of the color. If we can find a color, if they can find a color that would de-emphasize the bulk of the building. Signage, we'd like to see the signage along with the proposal. And we have comments about the lighting, about conforming with safe skies and with and color intensity. Tactile domes and concrete work should be appropriately done to conform with the rest of the community. So our letter is requesting setbacks on all corners of the building. It also requests that we have more attention paid to traffic effects of this design, especially since there is a new entrance on a residential street, which may be very problematic and need to be addressed. And then the third thing is that we would like to encourage the CVR Sea to have purview over buildings like this in the future because they have the expertise. So then attached, speaking of expertise, the fourth part of this is we have an attachment from one of the architects that works with the CVR Sea with her comments, which we're attaching to our letter. This is Katie Kosliak. I apologize if we don't have her name correctly, but that's how I think it is. So her basic comments, and they're attached as well, are that the building is out of scale with the rest of the community. And as we mentioned, that basic 3D picture of the project is not from an angle that would suggest its actual massive size. She's also got some comments about breaking up the solid roof line and the slope of the roof, which would make it look a little less massive, and taking a closer look at the actual height. She also has some comments about the windows, comments about landscaping, which would depend on where the setbacks are. She notes also that there's no elevation drawing provided to show the relationship with this building with the press, and that's important. She also mentions, and you will see this if you look closer at the plans, that immediately adjacent to the press is one of the more massive parts of the roof. So that if as this is redesigned, if it is, there should be some kind of step down from the most high aspects of the new building as it goes toward the restaurants to visually and experientially reduce the impact. She also says that we need to have colors and material boards to see exactly what they're proposing in the way of colors, because there's a problem with the way that's laid out. So that's basically our presentation, and I don't know if either Dan or Dave have anything to add to that, because we all worked on this.
From my perspective, you've covered it. Dan?
Yeah, I do want to add something just to reiterate the building. Can you put the facade
Sure.
in elevation? So the expansion would just, I think this would be the second largest, if it was approved, it would be the second largest building in El Granada, I think. Maybe, I'm not sure, I think the new fire district house would be the largest. And it's just important to note that, this is at a location at the gateway, the north gateway into El Granada. With the medians and the boulevard. So it would just be a massive structure right at the front of the community. And I don't think that it really, looking at it right here, I don't think that the design really represents the spirit or the character of the community. So, the size and of course the concern with the, it just doesn't seem appropriate to build all the way up to the Press Cafe. It seems like it should be stepped up so it's not so imposing. Now that the Press Cafe, the building, already has significant flavor of style, of architectural appeal. And I think that by putting this wall, the building all the way up to it, it'll look stupid and it'll take away from the gateway.
What is this view we're looking at here? I mean,
That's the back view.
the back view.
So we're opening it
So-
to clarifying
Yeah.
questions from the council at this point. So, yeah.
Well, other comments, I'm making comments.
I'm just trying to position, can you leave, where is the restaurant?
This is
Toward
where
the
it,
front of the
this is where it
property.
ends today. This is all new. I think this is where the driveway is, but I'm not sure.
It'd be easier to understand if you show the front of the building.
Well, right, but we're just trying to understand it from both.
Yeah.
So this is
So
from the street.
Press Cafe is on the right-hand side.
Yeah,
And as you see, it gets
And,
bigger and
I'd
bigger
like
as
to-
it gets toward the cafe.
I guess I can't
Right
understand,
here, right today, so all of this is new.
all of that's new, but
Yeah.
now go back to the previous picture.
Yeah, so it's like the three sections.
So I'm trying to piece these two together.
That's looking from Avenue Madrid.
Yeah, that's the
Yeah.
rear of the building if you were standing in the
It's all
parking lot.
existing. And then I think somewhere in here is actually the driveway.
Well, no, because the driveway
The
stays where it
driveway's on the
is.
other side of that
So
shed.
you sort of see where that's hanging over to the left,
Yeah.
right there. That's where the entrance
Yeah.
is off of
I don't think
Avenue
that's
Home.
No, that's not correct.
No, I think
It's just on the other
I think
side of that
driveway's right
shed.
here.
There's a staircase you
Yeah.
can see to the right of the shed. It's in that area.
So all this from here over is new.
Yes.
Is there any representation anywhere that's just top down so you can
Yep.
see the footprint?
Yep.
Okay. So there's a salon.
Right, so this
This
is
is
the beauty
existing?
salon.
No, that shows the
This
detail.
is all existing right
Right.
here.
Of the exit onto Madrid.
Here you go. Here
Here
it
the
is.
slide.
Here's the one that shows the whole site.
Okay,
And there's the stairs.
so, okay, so that is the dark gray where it says addition. That dark gray is not building, that's land, that's,
It's
Currently
currently
it's land, yes.
but no, did they
This,
want to
this
build?
is building. In the expansion, this is building. So the existing building comes out almost to the property line right here where my cursor is.
Okay,
And the new one also comes out almost to, it's
Right to the
stair
edge.
steps.
yeah,
It comes out pretty much right to the property line.
but that's, is it just the dark gray what's new because it looks?
Yes.
The existing building has a driveway under with two rooms that looks like on top of the driveway,
Yeah.
right
Mhm.
here. And then from here over would be new.
Yeah, the dark gray area is the new portion.
Yeah, and this is where the press is right
That's the
here.
press. And where is additional parking then?
The new,
Behind the gray
This is parking,
area building.
this is, because this is all dirt lot today.
Right.
This is the new parking.
the new parking there, okay.
And you want to show the Madrid access?
So what's gonna happen to the parking for the beauty salon?
They're gonna
Nothing.
shift it up to the north. If you see the first 5 spaces from Madrid,
Yeah.
those are all designated for the hair salon.
Any other clarifying questions, or shall we ask?
So
Yeah.
I'd like to finish, I was
I-
interrupted, go ahead.
Okay. I just have a clarifying question on the height, because we say in our draft letter,
That's my question.
you know, we're pleased to note that the height of the proposed expansion is 28 feet in keeping with standards, but in the letter from Katie, she says that it's not
The-
up to
The
standards.
original thing that we got made it seem like it was 32 feet. But
Okay,
if you look on these plans, it shows the very highest part of the peak roof is 28 feet.
28, okay.
Can you show that on the drawing right now?
Let's see if I can find it.
Does she know that?
I don't
Katie?
know.
Seems like it sort of weakens our argument.
Because it does,
to include-
I highlighted the exact same
Yeah.
thing, that stood out to me.
to include her letter if it's wrong.
The other thing she addresses that is not currently correct is whether or not this has a residential component, and it's
Right.
been determined by the county that it does not.
So, but there is planned living apartment. So
No,
there-
not anymore.
Okay, so it's
So we'll
really
talk
hard
more
to
about
see, but this is ridge line and it shows 28 feet max above grade. Let's see if I can do it larger. There it is, ridge line, 28 feet max. So that's actually slightly lower than the residential standards allow, because the residential standards are 28 feet with a complicated formula that doesn't count the very peak of the roof.
Dan, there was more to your presentation, you want to think?
Yeah, so, as far as, you know, how to mitigate this massive building, personally, I believe that any expansion should look like a separate building that's attached, something like if you could imagine, you know, a quaint bed and breakfast, or something that just to take away from this look of one big massive building. That's, you know, and I think that, you know, if you know, I just want to say that, you know, the existing facade, you know, they have some bay windows, but I think, you know, it's pretty plain. It could be improved. I think the whole project, you know, with a little attention, could be a much better project that we would be willing to live with. As far as the traffic on Madrid, I just want to note that I have lived on Madrid for 31 years. I know the traffic situation. It's basically a thorough way through people from Clipper Ridge going to the light to get out on Highway 1, and there's quite a bit of traffic and tends to drive pretty fast. On the busy days, on the weekend, now Madrid has turned into a bypass to Highway 1. People get on their Waze, whatever that app is, the Waze, and it tells them, hey, here's a shortcut. Go right down Madrid Avenue. And so I have witnessed, you know, just one after car after car after car, you know, racing through. So it brings particular concern for me can you go to the, where it shows the exit, proposed exit onto Madrid, please? I have a lot of concern with, you know, the safety of the whole situation. Across the street from this area, they just put in a new sidewalk. Historically, before that sidewalk, the cars would park essentially on the dirt, which would be the equivalent of on top of the sidewalk right now. So there's always been, you know, a little bit extra room to maneuver through this intersection. Now, because of the sidewalk, now trucks and boat trailers and RVs will be parked further into the street, essentially creating kind of a bottleneck. So with this proposed exit, you can clearly see that there's going to be line of sight issues with what will be heavier traffic on Madrid. And I think it's a bad design. I don't think it's necessary. And you know, I think it should be relooked at as to just keep the existing driveway, to not implement this. I think that's just asking for trouble in the future. Sirens, you know, unnecessary injuries due to the safety issue. And I'd like to hear more about, it's my understanding that there is a living unit. I hear you say that the county says no, there's not a made live-in quarters. There's not a residential aspect of this. I'd like you to tell me more, please, other than just saying, hey, that's what they said. They determined there's nobody going to be living in there.
Basically, well, I guess that's a clarifying question. Basically, the applicant stated that that will not be a residential unit, and since they've said that that's not it, then it's not, then the county has to accept
Taking
that.
the kitchen out and the whole
Yeah.
9 yards?
I think so, yeah.
Well, under this, regardless, I feel strongly that it should be in the purview. There should be an exception. They should look at this. It's the gateway to our community, and will be, you know, the second largest structure in El Granada. It's and especially, you know, also the issue building all the way up to the wall of the Press Cafe. I think that the design could be improved. Not against the whole motel expansion, but here's the time that we could make our community, you know, have the front door, have the front yard of our community look a little better. So that's all I have for now.
Okay. So,
Are there any questions for, you know,
Well-
around the traffic?
well, first of all, we need to see if there are comments from the community on this. I don't have any speaker slips. Were there people that wanted to speak to this? No? Okay. We'll close the public comment on that then. So, let's get a,
Before we go to more comment, could you frame, since what you're saying, effect is that normally if it were residential, it would be CVR Sea, we have a process there.
right.
In interjecting ourselves, what kind of options do we have in terms of response, and how does that relate to the process?
We're responding to a referral that was sent to us from the planner.
Mhm.
And when they send us a referral, we have the opportunity to say what we think. That's the basis on which we're responding.
So will we in effect be giving design suggestions and ask if they'll consider those?
That will be part of our comment, yes.
But we're
And
not
we would
asking
love to see the CDRC do this because they do have more
Okay.
experience in it, but since they are not eligible to review this, we're looking at it.
So are we gonna be working on this more than just this letter then?
At this point, this is all we've been asked to do.
This is the referral, this is the answer to the referral.
This is our answer to the referral. These are our comments.
If we choose to, we can comment further.
We can always comment further.
Are we talking about further comment that would require then taking it up at the next meeting? That is, it's not something we're gonna try to edit on the fly, or?
Well, it's always better if we don't edit it on the fly, but until the thing actually gets adjudicated, there's always room for more comments to be made in the future.
Is this a project that's also appealable to the Coastal Commission?
I think
I
it is.
believe not.
Maybe?
I do not believe it is because it's not west of the first road.
Okay.
So I wanted to show people, this is the county zoning map. This red line is the property line. So you can see it's not 100% accurate because they're overlaying it on a photo, aerial photo, but you can see it's really pretty much right up to the edge of the
So in
cliffs.
residential, a setback is required unless, but that's not the
But
case
not
for,
commercial.
for commercial?
That's what we brought up to the county several times over the last 2 years, asking for setbacks in commercial zones on the Midcoast, and we have not been successful yet. I also want to point out, just to strengthen what Dan was saying, I don't know how many people noticed it, but they were showing one-way arrows in here. So the plan is all traffic enters here and all traffic exits on the grid.
When currently they obviously enter and exit from the same, it works now. Why can't it work the same way in the future?
Would they
I think-
be getting permission from the neighboring property? Because like where the hair
No,
salon
that's
is?
their property.
They own it and they rent it? Okay.
Before we discuss this further, we should probably have a motion on the table to consider this.
I'll make a motion that we consider the letter.
Second?
Okay.
So open for discussion.
I'd like to make an amendment.
Go ahead.
It's actually two areas. I think that we should, let's see, it's the first, second, third, fourth paragraph. In terms of appearance, color, it just, I don't, it sounds like we'd be okay with it all one color. So I think we should change that to the color scheme. So if we add the before color and scheme after color, I think that would,
So the shading of the diagram you showed suggested it was all the same shade, the old and the new one. And therefore, I assumed it was gonna be white. like the
There
current
was a
one.
color palette, it wasn't completely sure what colors applied to what.
Apparently, some of the colors listed no longer exist, and it was certainly not very clear at all. But the sense of your amendment, Dan, would be that you want to make it clear that we're asking for a color scheme and not just a color. Is that correct?
yes.
Do you want to make a motion to that effect?
I'd like to make a motion, and in the fourth paragraph, we add the word "the" prior to color, and then the word "scheme" after.
I'll second.
All in favor of the amendment? Do we do that now, or do we have to be,
We have to approve the
Approve
letter,
the-
don't we?
after we approve the letter? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's on the table.
Sorry, who seconded the
Barbara.
amendment?
I did.
It's appropriate to do it now. Get that
Well,
out of the
there's
way.
rules of order, just seeing which ones apply at this moment.
What was your other one?
Generally, we discuss things and then we
I
vote
would-
on everything.
Okay, is there any discussion?
Well, I think one process is if you want to amend it, then either you accept it, the original proposer accepts the amendment, we can bundle them together.
Okay, so
Yeah, we don't need an amendment per change, we just need an amendment for the changes.
I'm a little confused, obviously.
Did you have another one, or just that one?
Well, I'd like to get this done first.
Okay, but it doesn't make sense to amend every paragraph in a separate motion. Just offer all your changes, and unless, because I don't think we're gonna have any, I don't think
Change
we're
is
gonna have any
completely
decision.
different. It's completely different.
Go ahead.
Your choice.
So I'd like to, you want to table that part for now? Okay, so I'll move on to the second one. And, the fact that it's the gateway, and the fact that, you know, the facade, the front of the building is just so repetitive and just, in my opinion, you know, the bigger the building, the more interesting the design should give the community. It's a simple design, and by doubling the size, now you've just got a massive, simple design. So based on that, I think that we should request, purview, and then the CVRC looks at it, because it's such an important location, and it's such a, it'd be such a visual impact to the community.
Unfortunately, we can't request that because it's in the CDRC charter and they would have to change it.
I think it's up to the, Steve Monowitz
No, it's up to the
to,
Board of Supervisors. It's the Board of Supervisors.
well, this letter's going to the Board of Supervisors, I think that they,
I'm just saying, the Board of Supervisors is the only one who can change it. So if you
So
want an
are you
amendment to
saying-
that, address it to the Board of Supervisors.
that's the idea.
Isn't that what that last paragraph is asking?
We're asking that the CDRC's charter be changed so that they will have purview over these kinds of things in the future. At this time, they do not have it.
Right.
So we can't make them have it now, but we are requesting that in the future they
I think that
do.
we can, there's nothing wrong with requesting.
We are
An
requesting
exception.
it. We are requesting it in that last
On this
paragraph.
project is what I'm talking about.
Maybe by the time this project is ready to be reviewed at the various agencies, our boards in question, they will have made that change.
Yeah.
At this point, they haven't, but we are
I think
asking
we need
them
to have somewhere in the letter a little bit more, language about, you know, the fact that it's the entrance, it's the gateway, it's.
There's two discussion points going on here. It sounds like Dan wants to request that we ask that the CDRC be able to review this, which would be a action that presumably they could take.
If it
But
was
is
approved by
that
the
what you were
supervisor.
trying to ask us to ask?
If it was approved by the supervisor, yes.
Right.
I understand the hurdle involved, I understand that. I don't think it's a bad idea to ask for that.
We would have to ask the Board of Supervisors for that. We can't ask the planner for that.
Okay, so the intent of that paragraph was to ask for that, so I think you're asking for making it just clearer or stronger language.
Yes, please?
So can you suggest wording?
Dave, so you're saying the last paragraph was intended to ask to put the CDRC to be able to review this?
Not necessarily this, because
Well,
hold
this
it.
and all
No, he's
commercial
saying
projects.
this.
This and all other commercial
Yeah.
projects.
Is that,
Why
okay.
don't we amend it to say that MCC requests that CDRC have this project and other commercial projects of this type added to their
Well,
charter?
that was fine.
I'd like to really focus on.
Dan, let her finish it. She put this.
That's fine. I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
The focus, I think, you have to have a really significant reason to make an exception, to have a variance, to look at this. And that reason needs to be emphasized. And that reason is the fact that it's at the gateway to the community, and the fact that it's such a large building with such, kind of, in my opinion, a simple facade.
But what we're asking is that all commercial buildings, including this.
So we're talking about two things at the same time. I agree with you that in the future, yes, all commercials, but
No.
Dan, did you get Michelle's
Yeah. I like
proposed
the way
language?
Michelle expressed it, and I believe it accomplishes what you're trying to accomplish, Dan.
And we can support the reasons in the following sentence, but
Okay.
I'm saying in the very last paragraph, the third sentence, the MCC requests that CDRC have this project and other commercial projects of this type added to their charter. And then we say they have the expertise in these projects, there's an S missing there, have a significant impact on the neighborhoods where they are located. In that sentence, we can mention something about gateway to the community.
I support that.
Okay.
Okay, I need actual wording.
Okay. Did you get the first?
You think just run it back for him, so you can get it.
Yeah, so third sentence in that paragraph, the MCC requests that CDRC have this project and other commercial projects of this type added to their charter.
You're gonna have to go a lot more slower
That's
than
it.
that.
CVRC have this project and,
Yes.
and other, and then,
Other
and that's it. That is really just those 4 words.
How does that match what you wanted, Dan?
Okay, so just for discussion purposes, I think
think-
that he asked me a question, Glenn, can
He
I
was
answer?
asking you, okay, go ahead.
So, just for discussion purposes, I think that it's a big hurdle for them to make a policy, a sweeping policy change for this. So, we can, the wording that you have, again, I'll say that I think it's better to emphasize this project now, and then in the future, hopefully we can someday see all projects.
I see what you're saying, but I'd rather see us ask for the consistent change rather than take this as an exception, so I think Michelle's approach is better.
I tend to agree because, in part because I don't think the Board of Supervisors is going to make a one project, already submitted project exception after the fact of the charter.
Yep.
I think that's vanishingly unlikely.
I would support Michelle's language.
Okay,
I think it addresses
And
the
then you
issue.
were gonna add something that really emphasizes why we're asking for this change?
Yeah, I was thinking in the following sentence, I haven't quite come up with the wording yet, but it's relevant to the fact that these projects have significant impact on the neighborhoods where they are located. If we want to add some wording around gateway to the community, I think that's a great place for it. We could switch around the order of the sentence and say, this location on, Avenue, Alhambra is a gateway to the community. And projects like this have significant impact on the neighborhoods where they are located. And then we could say, we feel that the CDRC has the expertise to evaluate these projects, or something like that.
Can I help just for a second?
Yeah?
I think that the 2 ideas we're trying to put across is that 1, it's at the gateway of El Granada.
Mm-hmm.
2, the proposed building would be the second largest building in the community, and it has essentially a fairly plain, besides a massive, simple design that we would have to.
Well, I feel like,
Those are the-
sorry, I feel like those are 2 separate points. Like if we're still gonna be focusing on having the CDRC review these types of projects, that language could go here. But if we're talking about the character, we should probably, look at a different paragraph where we already talk about the style.
How about the last paragraph of page 1, which right now reads in its entirety, the massing impact is increased by building out to the property line with no setbacks. We request that commercial projects have setbacks to reduce their impact in the neighborhood. Somehow you insert in this paragraph or rewrite this paragraph that this neighborhood is particularly important because it's a gateway neighborhood. Does that help?
Yeah, and then we could say and we're asking for them to grant purview to the CDRC, we can say, based on the arguments in paragraph 2.
That'll make sense. That'll be good. Did you want to put something in there about it being the second largest building in
Well,
El Granada?
so are we sure of that?
Yeah, well, I'm not sure.
I think it's gonna be like the 3rd or 4th.
Let's leave that part out.
The Oceana Hotel.
It's not
is
El
bigger.
Granada.
Yeah, that's in El Granada.
It's
As
in
far as the
Princeton.
county's concerned.
It's in Princeton. It's
That's
not
not-
El Granada.
That's
It's the
not
same
what he
community
said.
to the county.
Also, the school is quite big.
That's true.
Yeah.
I think it being the gateway is certainly an important
Yeah.
point. We can include that.
Yep, I just stay with Gateway.
So do we have the language on those two
I
or
don't
three?
have, I don't have the language, I was just sort of brainstorming.
Would you
Somebody
say
wanna
just a
suggest
massive
the
building
language?
at the gateway?
Okay.
Yes, okay. So do you want to take a run through from the top, Dave, and we can,
Well, I'd rather somebody else comes up with the wording, because it's really hard for me to record the wording as I'm saying it.
or this paragraph,
So the last paragraph on page 1 is the one.
that's the first one we're considering now, what to do.
Yeah.
But we talk about setbacks also in the longer paragraph above that begins with however.
Mhm.
And I feel like the last paragraph that begins with the massing impact is more general, again, with the problem of, we're talking, we want to talk specifically about this building. If we're talking specifically about this building, I think it's more appropriate in the paragraph beginning with however. Because we mentioned
Yeah,
setbacks.
I agree.
I mean, it's basically a list of reasons why this is out of character.
So,
Maybe at the end of the sentence, just add at the gateway entrance, the north gateway entrance.
where?
At the end of which
the
sentence?
first sentence. That makes
The
it
massing
long-
impact is increased by
Makes
building.
the sentence longer, which is not always a good idea.
Sorry, you're talking about which paragraph?
Well, you suggested the second paragraph.
Yeah, so the however, the sentence beginning with however.
Or is it the third?
Oh,
Yes, that.
yeah. I was thinking of that
So-
one.
I guess it's the third.
So something like out of scale with other businesses and residences in this gateway neighborhood?
That sounds okay.
Or we could say, however, we have several remaining concerns about this property that is located at the gateway to El Granada.
Whatever, I'm fine with any of these.
I like that.
Okay,
Because that's a short sentence, and then we just add to it.
Remaining concerns remaining concerns about
About this project,
this project and a gateway.
which is located at the gateway to El Granada.
And then going to the chief among them is.
Remaining concerns about this project that is located in,
At the gateway.
at the gateway
And then you wanted to change color to the color scheme.
Okay,
at the-
wait, one thing at a time. Okay, so the first sentence now reads, however, we have several remaining concerns about this project that is located at the gateway to El Granada. Is that correct?
Hmm.
Gateway entrance, I don't know.
let's go with that one. Let's-
Which one, gateway or entrance?
Gateway.
Gateway,
Okay.
okay,
And I think there's two other changes we're going to make. One was the changing the color to the color scheme,
Mhm.
We got that one already. That
Okay.
was Dan's first amendment.
right? And then,
So Michelle has two amendments on the table, one amendment with two changes. The first one is the CDRC have this project and other commercial projects. The other is the one we just read in the second paragraph.
In that last paragraph, just a little correction, is that sentence that begins, they have the expertise.
Yeah,
And
project
these
should be
projects,
plural.
yes.
Yeah, I got that already. That's just a simple typo. We don't need an
Yep.
amendment for that.
Okay.
do you want to read that last paragraph, Dave, as you have it?
This is described as purely commercial with no residential component. The Coastal Design Review Committee has not yet begun to review commercial building. The MCC requests that the CDRC have this project and other commercial projects of this type added to their chart.
yep.
So,
Uh,
what?
Am I the only one on the council that considers that facade kind of a simple design or repetitive design? I think I heard you mention something, Clara.
I think we were talking about the windows. I think our question right now is with the letter, is the letter adequate?
Okay, so that's what I'm talking about. I'm just asking, is there
I'm not-
anybody else in the council that agrees with me that it's somewhat of a simple, a kind of a repetitive,
I'm just
design?
not interested in going into that design detail in the letter at this point.
It is identical to what's already there, essentially.
So
And
I
you're
have
just
one
saying it's
person
too
that's
much
kind
of
of.
I-
I'm just trying to clarify, so it's not that in and of itself, it's too much, is that what you're saying? I'm just trying to understand.
Generally, the bigger the building, it should have more architectural appeal. It's a simple thing, it's expanded, it's almost like a mirror image. And so now it's a massive building of, in my opinion, simple design. Am I the only one that?
I don't think you're
Hold on,
necessarily the
look,
only one that thinks that,
Just
Dan,
asking the council,
but
if
I think
there's
we're-
anybody
I'm
else-
Just give her
responding.
a chance. She's leading.
I'm just asking if
Let her
anybody
go.
else.
Dan, I don't know if you're the only one that thinks that or not, but that's not what we're addressing in the letter at this point. We're not going into that
I am-
detail.
I'm asking the question for a reason, and that is if we could add something up to express that in the letter. I'm first trying to find out if am I the only one.
I'm not interested in doing that.
I'm not
Okay.
either.
I am not either. So,
Okay.
I
Well,
mean,
let's
that's
move on then.
that's only three of us, so.
Well, I have similar concerns. I mean, I have other concerns I haven't expressed here, but, one being the fact that I just was looking up availability for this weekend in the middle of summer, and there are already rooms available, and adding more to it, is probably just going to reduce the rate that people pay, and just, it feels, like it sort of cheapens the neighborhood. To me, that's like a little bit of a concern, but I don't think that's appropriate here. Just as I agree with you about the design, I think a simple design leads to lower quality, and I agree with you, but I don't necessarily agree with adding that to this letter.
And the only reason I'm bringing it up is that I believe it supports the request of having CVR Sea purview.
One of the things that we've traditionally tried to do is not write letters in a meeting. What we've tried to do is to put together a letter ahead of time and have people look at it and consider it as a whole, and if there are significant changes that need to be made, then make an amendment. But going back and rethinking the whole premise of the letter and adding a large amount of additional detail is probably not something we want to make in the habit of doing.
Just
We have
part of
time tonight to do that because we have a light agenda, but in general, this is not a good process.
It's just part of the discussion, that's all. So
So you want to push for the
if
change?
we're outvoted, I think that it does add to the argument, the argument requesting to have CVRC purview. If I'm the only one, then let's just move on.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay, so we have one motion and two amendments on the table. The first amendment is Dan's amendment about the color,
So, and we have a second on that one.
second by Barbara.
Mhm.
Michelle had made a motion. If somebody seconded it,
Seconded.
I didn't catch it.
second.
Okay.
Okay. So we vote on the First Amendment first,
Yeah.
about adding that to the letter. So the First Amendment is regarding changing color to the color scheme. All in favor of that amendment? All against? 6-0. Passes. The Second Amendment is the two changes we made in the paragraph starting however, and in the final paragraph, which have already been read. So if we're ready to vote on that one, all in favor of those changes? All opposed? That carries 6-0.
Okay, and now we have
So we're
the-
ready to vote on the entire letter as amended. Do we have a motion for that?
It is moved and seconded by Barbara and Lynn.
Okay. All in favor of the letter as amended? All opposed? 6-0, it passes. Thank you. Okay, moving on to council activity. Lynn?
I have some things to report. It's been observed in various ways in the community that there is a construction or restoration activity going on Pillar Point. It's a project done by a group called Go Native and funded by the Air Force. It's created confusion in the community because the last trail work was to gravel the Gene Lauer Trail, which we found unsatisfactory, and people were concerned that they were part of a unified overall effort. The two things are completely separate as projects. They may have an overall impact on trails on the coast. So there was concern raised as to whether the project was calling for a roadway to be built down to Ross Cove, which was just a misinterpretation of some wording in a letter, and I think somewhat misunderstood. They're basically just trying to create a better landing place at the top of the bluff for vehicles to park if there's a rescue operation underway. So I think it's a good project. I think that combined with other activities going on would merit a consideration of the bluff and the trails there. But I just wanted to put this on the record in terms of awareness of what's going on. And I've had a chance to talk both to the Coastal Commission and county parks about it. So that's an update. Second, Dave has brought to the attention an action by the Coastal Commission for further armoring near the Murata Bridge. And I checked back with County Department of Public Works in terms of that project. They're continuing to move ahead with that design. And so I think they expect to bring it to us sometime in September or thereafter. It's also the case that once you have that project, the bridge project, and then the uncertainty about Murata Road, that getting an overall update there would also probably be appreciated by the community. So we've looked into that point. And finally, in talking to DPW and looking at the completion of the fire station, I was interested in what provisions were made for road improvements, sidewalks, et cetera, in that area, since it's fairly rough ground all around. And I think what I've determined is that there's no project to do anything more but leave the dirt where it is when the fire station itself is done. So I think that'll lead to an interest in requesting DPW to look at that as a future project. But that's where it stands now.
Barbara and Michelle, both of you have something to report, or I think I may
have a
have
little
skipped over
update.
the announcement part.
Oh, yeah. I just have a brief update on National Night Out, which is the event that's going to happen on August 6th, where members of the community, both in Half Moon Bay and on the Midcoast, are going to be holding block parties to increase awareness and get people just to know their neighbors and help. And a big theme of it will be emergency preparedness. And so we do have 3 volunteers so far to hold block parties in different neighborhoods. In, I think, Miramar, Moss Beach, and then in the harbor community. And we are, sorry, that was Montera, not Miramar. We're looking for a couple more, so if anyone is interested, I posted on Facebook and Nextdoor, and I'm still looking for a couple volunteers. We have 2 more $100 gift cards to go toward, from Supervisor Horsley to go toward funding those events. So please contact me, Michelle Weil, MCC, @gmail.com if you're interested.
Thank you.
When is the planned date again?
August 6th. It's a Tuesday. It's 2 weeks from yesterday.
On Tuesday.
Yeah, it's Tuesday.
Barbara, we have a date on the Adopt a Highway,
August 3rd,
August 3rd?
Saturday, 9 a.m. I'll
Contact
send out
you.
an email.
Okay, thank you.
Are we looking for more volunteers?
I'll volunteer for that. That's Saturday morning.
9.
Oh, man.
Anything else on council activity?
Yes.
What?
I wanted to report that Catch Joanne has recently changed their hours of operation. And it appears that the bathroom situation, that their bathrooms are locked, is maybe affecting their business, and they're reducing their hours as a result. So, I'm not sure what can be done about it, but I'm bringing this up because I'm very concerned. We've already lost 30 Cafe, which was an icon of the coast for 25 years, and now the Catch Joanne has been there for 45 years, and, you know, it looks like they could use some help from the community to get them through this. I personally would love to see them stay. It's a great little place. There's that, and then also, some of you may already be aware that the Harbor District recently purchased the post office lot from the fire district. Does everybody know where the post office lot is? It's
El Granada.
immediately west of the post office on the one block of downtown El Granada, Motel. It's on the far west side, so it has the ocean view. I guess they're going through some architect and designs, but that essentially they want to build an office building there for their offices. And they are working with the GCSD to try to come up with some kind of collaborative arrangement. And there has been a community sketch of a proposal of keeping the corner open as like a town plaza and having some type of a retail element so that someone from the community can walk down to the town center and actually use the downtown as it was meant to be. So I just want to make note that they are going through a process, and there are community members that will be commenting on the project.
Okay, thank you. I think one of the things we may talk about at the retreat, which I'm getting into is the next thing, would be how to structure council activity reports as opposed to announcements, as opposed to agenda items, and we can kind of figure out what goes where, but I think all of this information is really valuable. I would like to move on to future agendas. We will have a council retreat here on the 5th of August in this room at 7 p.m. I appreciate everybody's cooperation in putting that together, and we will have an agenda that comes out and will be publicized to the community. Everybody's welcome. I have a few things that we've already talked about putting on the agenda. Obviously, all of this is not going to end up there, but I'm just mentioning the things we've already talked about, at least some of them, with the hopes that everybody else will think about things that they would like to make sure that we talk about. The basic tenor of a retreat is to talk about processes that involve the council itself more than processes that involve issues that involve the general community. So it's a time for us to sort of look at how we're doing and how we're doing it. Things that we have talked, that Dave and Len and I have been talking just a little bit, we'll talk a lot more. Some of the things that have come up to look at would be meeting processes, including clear communication, facilitating, handling complex issues, just generally how the meeting is run, maintaining records of referrals and other information, maintaining records of task assignments, availability of documents and other correspondence to the entire council, how to support agenda item, how to sponsor agenda items, public involvement, finances, and we're open for more suggestions now, or if anybody, including the public, wants to send me an email later on about other ideas they'd like to see us addressed, we'll be putting together an actual agenda and selecting the things that we probably have time to deal with. So any other ideas that people have at the moment, we're welcome to hear them.
Well, I expect that it's going to be a free and open discussion about council activities, so we're not going to be directed to not talk about this or only talk about that.
We do have to have an agenda though, so.
But
So we've kind of put
with
it
the
together.
agenda is a skeleton structure.
Exactly.
We're going to have a free, open discussion.
No point in doing it if we can't talk about it.
Just like our normal retreats, the agenda will be mutual discussion, blah, 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 so it's pretty wide open.
Okay, so we'll be getting that out as soon as we reasonably can. And then we're not meeting on the 14th. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second? All in favor? Thank you.